views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on the Bronx Journal, Hurricane Maria 1 year later. How has the response to the storm changed Puerto Ricans' ideas about the island and its relationship to the U.S.? And did the response change people's feelings about the Commonwealth status of the island? Also, this week's elections. What else is on the ballot besides the governor's race that may change the way we run our city and the way we pay for elections? And how do Bronxites vote and where do they live? We'll map it out. Finally, we'll preview a special report on the borough's exploding and evolving housing situation. All this right now on the Bronx Journal. Hello and welcome to the Bronx Journal. I'm Jim Carney. The Bronx Journal is a collaborative production of Lehman College's Journalism and Media Studies Department, the Lehman Multimedia Production Center, and BronxNet Community Television. We bring you the research and reporting of students from the Journalism and Media Studies Department right here at Lehman College, as well as the work of the music, art, and other programs of Lehman. Lehman College is the Bronx's senior liberal arts college of the city of New York. This program is presented through the combined efforts of Lehman and BronxNet Community TV, the Bronx's award-winning community television and media organization, and comes to you via BronxNet's cable TV channels and is streamed on demand through bronxnet.org and thebronxjournal.com. The audio portion of today's show is available through the Lehman College channel on tunein.com and on the TuneIn app. The reporting and work on the Bronx Journal is created and presented by students of Lehman College. Today, we begin with a look back at the impact of Hurricane Maria on the island of Puerto Rico just over a year ago. Recently, a special panel discussion and conversation featuring journalists and researchers from the island and the mainland took place right here on the Lehman campus. The Bronx Journal's Angel Tobar has the report.
The after effects of Hurricane Maria have left the island of Puerto Rico in complete devastation. The island is in debt billions of dollars, its people have experienced traumatic circumstances, and have been plagued with thousands of deaths which the U.S. government has yet to acknowledge. Political activists and journalists say that the U.S. government has been taking advantage of the island since it was acquired from Spain following the Spanish-American War in 1898.
Historically, any structure created by the United States government from 1898 until the present has always been to the detriment of Puerto Rico. It has never been for the benefit or the interest of the Puerto Rican people.
The United States has a long history of merchandising Puerto Rico and its people, the most recent example being the Promesa Act.
Promesa was created in order for Puerto Rico to pay. There is not a single Puerto Rican who can tell anyone in Puerto Rico, and I'm talking about the Puerto Ricans who really love Puerto Rico, who can tell anyone how that money was spent.
A free associated state does not exist, and depopulating Puerto Rico seems to have always been the plan. The island has always been subjected to everything Washington does.
People were under the illusion that as a Commonwealth, that they had an autonomous government, that they could make decisions for themselves and that they were really U.S. citizens. So when the hurricane happened, it was revealed that this status that Puerto Rico had, it was a farce, or it wasn't real.
If the United States government would allow Puerto Rico to be an independent country, and that created this farce of a citizenship, and a second farce to say that Puerto Rico is a free associated state.
The events leading up to Hurricane Maria have pushed a different agenda for some Puerto Ricans in terms of what the island's political standing should be. The way the American government has handled the situation in Puerto Rico raises many questions for the island and its people.
I think that what we have been seeing in the last years is Puerto Rico being the same kind of playground for experimentation in very different aspects of our financial, fiscal, and social life, which is no different from our tradition, you know, being a colony.
What do we have in Puerto Rico? What is ours? And those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves. If we are thinking and dare to say, well, we should have a better and more just world.
The future of Puerto Rico's political state is still uncertain. Oscar Lopez Rivera will continue to push for the U.S. General Assembly to take Puerto Rico's case. Reporting for BronxNet, this is Angel Tobar.
Thanks, Angel. Given the response or lack of response to the hurricane, we wondered if people's opinions regarding the status of the island nation have changed. Should Puerto Rico declare independence from the U.S. Commonwealth status? Should Puerto Rico's status be changed, or should it be left as it is? Reporter Lloyd Beckford traveled to Rodman's Neck Park to ask folks their feelings on Puerto Rico and the disaster.
What's your take on Hurricane Maria and the impact that it had on Puerto Rico?
Oh, God, that was horrible. I seen it on TV. I seen it on Facebook. It's horrible. I wouldn't want to be there. It was horrible. Like the whole island practically got wiped out.
And with the way, the aftermath of that and how they were treated, pretty much how the situation was handled.
Well, they were treated like second-class citizens, like they're not part of the United States.
I was born in Puerto Rico.
Which part?
Corazon.
Corazon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you have family back in Corazon?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How were they impacted by Hurricane Maria?
Terrible, terrible.
As far as with the hurricane hitting Puerto Rico and the aftermath, as far as how everything was treated, would you say there would be a bigger press now for independence?
I would say yeah, because they didn't get the help from the United States. Only certain people went. I would give 0 for here.
I feel sorry for my grandkids over there.
Okay, so you would rather them not be independent on their own?
No.
Okay. Why would you say to remain U.S. territory?
Because it's for better life.
Better life?
For my kid, my grind and my grave. I have 5 grandkids over there, and I want better life for my grandkids.
It hurts, you know, it hurts in my heart, mind, and it hurts our family as well. You know, our children won't get to see the beauty of Puerto Rico like we did at one time.
I thought they would get more help. My ex-father-in-law was in the hospital when Hurricane Maria came, and they lost services, and he wound up passing away, so that's how it affected me. He was a good guy, retired city worker.
Sorry to hear that.
And I thought that they would just get more help in the hospitals and the people in need, and I found that, you know, the United States didn't help us enough.
Thanks, Lloyd. Those were some voices from the Bronx on the situation in Puerto Rico. I have with me now several Bronx Journal reporters who've been looking at the news closer to home. Yadira Gomez, Robert Pena, and Denise Mendoza. Welcome, all of you. You've each been working on stories about Puerto Ricans who've arrived in New York in the year since the hurricane. So, Yadira, we'll start with you. Tell us about what you found. You reported on a memorial service, right? That recognized the 1-year anniversary.
Yes.
What was that about?
Okay, so Puerto Ricans were present.
Right.
I spoke to this one lady in specific. Her name is Clemencia Cepeda, a lovely lady, by the way. And she basically told me her experience after the hurricane and how Puerto Ricans, as a group, they felt mistreated but also betrayed by the government. And how their whole life they were thinking that they were citizens of the United States. But all of a sudden, they feel like a colony, and they are treated like a colony.
What did the people talk about at that memorial service? What did they say?
Okay, they were talking about the death and how they had to witness the people they loved, how they died, because they didn't have like the resources to keep fighting after the hurricane. Like things like potable water, medicine, and food were not there at the time of the aftermath of the hurricane.
What about now? Is there any sense of finality or closure on the part of the people at that service?
Well, in many places in Puerto Rico right now, they don't have electricity. Right. So in many of them, they don't have their jobs, they don't have their homes, they are living with a family member. And yeah.
Okay. So they're trying to get back to a regular life, but it's still far from normal there, right? Denise, What have you found in terms of numbers of new arrivals of people coming here after the hurricane?
Based off information provided by people who have done research on the numbers, there was nearly 400,000 Puerto Ricans who came to the U.S.
500,000, it's almost 500,000, right?
Between October 2017 and February 2018.
Mm-hmm. Do we know how many people ended up here in the Bronx, or where did they come when they came to this country? Oh, I'm sorry, when they came to the mainland. When they came to the mainland, they all part of the country.
Well, most of the displaced Puerto Ricans came to Florida, but those, well, in the beginning, when Hurricane Maria first started, there was about 7,000 in the Bronx, but currently we don't have like a real number to give.
Okay, but the connection with Puerto Rico here in the Bronx is really strong, isn't it?
Yes, if you walk outside, you have, you could bump into somebody who has friends from Puerto Rico who came here, or family members from Puerto Rico who came here.
And you're finding this all in the reporting that you're doing on the story?
Yeah.
Great, okay. Robert, you reported on the services that the city is providing now and afterwards, after the disaster in Puerto Rico. What's happening now in terms of that?
Well, since FEMA ended, non-governmental organizations.
FEMA, that's the Federal Emergency Management.
Correct.
And they provide the immediate,
housing.
or they're supposed to provide the immediate stuff.
So
right.
Since that has ended in late July into August, non-governmental organizations in New York City have been paying for housing vouchers,
right.
moving families to homeless shelters that are provided, and extending housing in hotels.
Okay. And you're in contact with people?
Yes, I'm currently in contact with State Senator Gustavo Rivera and Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr.'s office, Public Relations team.
Okay.
And what I got back from them so far is that the Bronx Borough basically partnered with a local organization in the Bronx to help those in need, the displaced Puerto Ricans in need. And that was pretty much it.
Okay. This goes to any one of you. What are some of the hardships that people who are coming from Puerto Rico here to the Bronx, or anywhere on the mainland for that matter, what kind of hardships are they facing? Who wants to take that?
At this point, I think it's just existing, because, you know, like Yadira said, they went from feeling like they were citizens of the United States to feeling like they were just like a colony. They don't have enough help, and you know, like they're having trouble living just in one area, like having to stick to one home to call home. They keep on going from houses to houses, being stuck in an overcrowded home. And also school is hard to adjust to in a new environment.
I guess people don't think about the everyday life things that get totally disrupted when they're forced to come. Did you find that amongst people that are not deeply aware of this, who have family or friends, that regular non-Puerto Rican people are aware of all of the problems that these people are facing?
I would say the majority not, because they don't have, or they're not aware of it, or they don't have the information to know that that's actually happening. And even if they know, they probably wouldn't even know how to even approach the situation or how to help those people in need.
Do you think that there's a sense of hopelessness on the part of the people that are here? Like the people that have relocated here? Is there, do they have hope that their lives will get normalized again, do you think? Or they're just getting day to day?
I mean, I know that what they lost cannot be recovered.
Right.
They lost a lot of lives, the loved ones. But things like material things, you can get it.
Yeah.
And I know everything, when you move to another place, it's hard for you because now you have to learn the language. Now you have to get used to all this kind of stuff around you. And it's not going to be the same. I know it's not going to be the same. But at least you're there, you're living.
Do people express that they want to go back to the island at some point? That it's their goal to return, or they've basically figured that they're here to stay? Did any?
I mean, the island was everything to them. Like, you hear stories about how they felt like the island was rich and beautiful and wonderful, and then Hurricane Maria stripped all of that away once the disaster happened. I think when they go back, they want to see their island the way they once saw it.
Mm-hmm. How difficult was it to get information, Robert? You talked about FEMA and that sort of information. How readily available was that information? Did you have to dig for that?
Yes, I had to dig a lot, and just keeping in contact with the state officials and government agencies was a little bit of a challenge, because some of them didn't actually get back to me, but we're still working on that. So just being directed from one person to the other, to finally speaking to them saying, oh, when we get a chance to respond back to you. So it was a bit of a challenge, but I feel like the progress is progress being made.
Mm-hmm. So the governmental problems we had with the storm are continuing with the service to the people here in the mainland. Is that something that you found?
Yes, I'll say there still is a lot of that going on, because after those programs by Governor Cuomo or Bill de Blasio, there hasn't been much efforts to actually lead anybody in the right direction to where they should be going. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
This research that you've been doing and this reporting that you're doing, has it changed the way you look at people who have crises like this? Is it affecting you as individuals reporting on these sorts of things? Anybody can feel that. Denise, you want to take that?
Yeah. I feel like it's actually harder to, you know, I guess to realize that these people aren't getting help. Like, most of the disasters that happen in the U.S., some people recover quickly, but it's already been a year since Hurricane Maria happened, and these Puerto Ricans still don't have the help they need. Mm-hmm. So I think it's taking longer for them, and I think that's the harder thing about it, because they are part of the U.S., but they're not being treated like they are.
In our last 30 seconds, anything that you folks want to add about this whole journey that you've taken reporting on this?
Well, I feel like it's been alarming and both eye-opening, just because putting yourself in that position, what would you do or how would you go about it? So I understand their frustration and what's to come.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time for this segment. Yadira Gomez, Robert Pena, and Denise Mendoza, thank you very much for your reporting and for joining us here today. Well, what are some of the challenges for people who've landed here in the past year? Here's what some Bronxites are telling Bronx Journal reporter Deanna Garcia.
We spoke to several Bronxites about their family situations in Puerto Rico. Kalali told us that she has a grandfather who lives in the mountains, and they yet struggled to send him supplies. Due to the lack of power, Kalali had to send over a generator from New York to Puerto Rico.
You have to order it from here, have someone, like a cop, go get it. Like, we had to pay somebody and bribe them to go get the generator.
One of my nieces, her daughter, got in contact with me, and I immediately started trying to assist them. But they said not to send anything out to them because it wouldn't reach them. In other words, someone would steal it or take it.
Trying to help my mom in particular, because she was living there for quite some time, and because of Maria, she had to move. So she had to relocate to Rochester. So that's like a completely different climate.
Fashion designer Edwin Reyes has family members from Puerto Rico and was worried from the videos he saw on social media.
Just seeing a whole bunch of videos, pictures of people who were affected during the storm and afterwards, and just all the after effects of this, all the chaos.
Some people still have no roofs. You can see like writings on the floor. You say like "help me" and stuff.
You see McDonald's, you see Burger Kings, all of these stores.
Bronxites then talk about the advantage the United States has and what the country should have done during the aftermath of Hurricane Maria.
Colonization, you know what I mean? They're just taking advantage of the island, of its resources, and not giving anything back.
Name any country out there, they could have easily have gotten loans from another country to help get restored. Our ships were not allowed to bring in help because there was an agreement made, which, like, dude, bypass that for a minute and help these people.
I think because they're already independent. You know, the United States is not helping us in any way.
Since it's on an island, it needs support from other countries to provide and to for resources and things like that. So I feel like it's, 50-50.
Many have expressed their feelings towards Puerto Rico becoming independent from the United States due to the lack of support they have received. I'm Deanna Garcia reporting from BronxNet.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex them. All the ones get but if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
Welcome back to the Bronx Journal. I'm Jim Carney. Most people are very familiar with the so-called midterm elections that are taking place this week, but many New York City residents may be surprised to find a ballot that spans 3 or in some cases 4 pages of text that go well beyond the publicized races for governor, attorney general, and state legislators. The 3 so-called ballot issues or voter questions may take voters by surprise, so we wanted to take a closer look at what these questions are all about. Joining me once again, Bronx Journal reporter Yadira Gomez, and a special guest joining us, Eric Friedman. He's the Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs at the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Before we start with the specific questions, give us a little background on what the Campaign Finance Board actually does.
Sure. Well, the New York City Campaign Finance Board is an independent, nonpartisan city agency. We administer the city's public matching funds program for city elections, which we'll get into a little bit as we talk about the ballot questions. We also do a lot of voter outreach and voter education through our voter engagement initiative, which is called NYC Votes. We publish a voter guide, which we mail. If you're a registered voter, you got one of these in your mail, hopefully in the last week or so. We do a lot of outreach and provide information to New Yorkers about their voting rights and how to vote.
And that's just not for this election. This is something, how long has the board been functioning about?
The board has been around since 1989.
Okay.
In addition to doing the voter guide, we sponsor debates for city elections. We publish voter guides online for every election, whether city, state, federal. So if you go online to voting.nyc, that's a great way for you to get to our voter guide and learn about all the candidates that are on the ballot that you mentioned, as well as information about the questions that are on the back of the
Okay,
ballot.
well, let's turn to those questions. Yadira, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Let's get more information about what those questions are.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you. Where will voters find these ballot questions?
Good question. So we mentioned all of the candidates on the ballot, and you'll see governor and controller, attorney general, voting for your representatives to Congress. Got to flip. One thing to remember when you go to your poll site next week, 2 pages, right? So on the back, you will find the 3 ballot questions. So remember to flip your ballot over. And here you'll find the text of the question on the back in kind of small print.
Yeah, I was just going to say, remember to bring your reading glasses into the ballot booth, right?
Right, and study up and read up. Again, the voter guide should be in your mailbox. It has more information, along with the text of the questions, it'll have more information on each of the questions, reasons to vote yes and no.
So go in prepared, understand and know what those questions are. Okay?
Okay, so can you explain what the charter revision is and where did these questions come from?
Sure. So earlier this year, back in the spring, the mayor appointed a charter revision commission, and formally their charge is to review the city's charter, which is like our version of the Constitution, the city's governing document. But the mayor had a few specific areas he wanted that commission to look at, areas that would improve the city's democracy, right? The idea, hopefully, is that if the more New Yorkers who are engaged and involved in our democracy, the better government we'll have, the more responsive, the more representative it will be. And so they came up with questions in 3 areas. One, campaign finance and instituting additional reforms to our campaign finance system. Second, civic engagement, to create a civic engagement commission. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And third are some reforms to the city's community board process.
Okay. This one is about the campaign finance system. Can you let our viewers know a little bit about public financing?
Sure. So we have public matching funds available to candidates who run in city elections. And it's essentially an anti-corruption program, right? The city provides funds to candidates so they don't have to rely so much on kind of asking special interest contributors for large contributions and potentially be tempted to make promises in exchange for large contributions. It also, by making those funds available, encourages more New Yorkers to run for office. It means you don't need to have a lot of money yourself. You don't need to know rich folks in order to run for office. The city makes funding available to you if you qualify for the program. And how it works is it will match small contributions from city residents, the first $175. So that means if you go and knock on the door of one of your neighbors and ask them for $20, that $20 ends up being $140 into your campaign, which is a meaningful contribution. And it means that candidates can build strong competitive campaigns to run for office, whether it's city council or borough president or mayor, by relying on organizing their friends and neighbors behind their ideas.
New York City in particular has been in recent years, I think, a little ahead of the curve, basically, in dealing with trying to address campaign finance and trying to offset some of the problems that dollars play in elections.
That's right. New York City is the first big city in America to have a public matching funds program like this, and the system has become a model for other states and cities looking to address these questions around money in politics. Over the years, the program has been changed and strengthened as a result of action by the city council or charter revision commissions to increase the amount of matching funds available to candidates, to increase disclosure for so-called independent expenditures in our system. But because of that, New York remains a kind of model for other reformers across the country.
Okay, so if passed, this proposal will increase the number of public funds available to participating candidates. Where will these funds come from?
So the funds come from from the city's general fund, which means they're made up of our taxes that we pay to the city government. To the extent that folks are not supportive of the matching funds, but a lot of them worry about the cost. But ultimately, the cost is a fraction of a % of the city's overall budget. But in the end, I think just to go back to the proposal, what it will do is it will do 2 main things, right? It will lower the top contribution limit, right? So for a candidate for mayor, right now, under current law, can ask contributors for as much as $5,100. The question would cut that by more than half to $2,000. For city council, it'll take that top limit from $2,850 down to $1,000. At the same time, it will increase the amount of matching funds available to candidates, so that it kind of replaces that private money with public funds. And so the net effect, I think the folks who support the question would say, the net effect is it will decrease candidates' reliance on those large contributions that potentially come from special interests and other wealthy New Yorkers, and increase their ability to rely on those small contributions that come from the neighborhoods.
Okay.
Okay, this one is the last question, and it's about civic engagement. What are the long-term effects proponents of these questions are hoping to achieve?
So, I mean, one of the issues that the mayor laid out at the start of this conversation around charter revision is, not enough New Yorkers vote, and not enough New Yorkers are engaged with their government. Volunteerism should be higher than it is. So there are a couple things that this question will do. First, it'll create a civic engagement commission, the members of which will be appointed by the mayor and other elected officials to help kind of consolidate the city's efforts around these questions, and will help agencies with their public engagement efforts and really be a kind of a central clearinghouse for the city's efforts to help citizens engage with government. And there are two kind of big projects that they'll have set out for them. One is participatory budgeting. Currently, participatory budgeting is offered in maybe 31 council districts around the city. But what it does is it enables city residents to propose projects to be funded by city, through the city budget, to address particular needs in their neighborhoods. This can be a particular project to help fund repairs at a school, or to help improve a local park, or to make changes to a particular intersection that is problematic. And so folks will organize around these projects, and there will be a vote in those districts, and the projects that get the most votes receive funding through the budget. And so this is as a way of engaging more New Yorkers in that process and encouraging them to advocate for their own local needs. It's been popular. So the question, if passed, would expand that program citywide. The other thing it will do is provide access to election-related materials in more languages, right? So New York City, we've been talking a little about this, but New York City is a city of immigrants. Currently under federal voting, under the Voting Rights Act, we and the Board of Elections both provide materials in certain languages other than English, right? Our voter guide is available not only in English, but in Spanish all over the city.
Great.
We provide information also in Chinese and Korean and Bengali, and those languages are covered by the Federal Voting Rights Act. There are hundreds of languages spoken in New York City by folks who make this their home.
Well, that's a good point to point out. People should read the voter guide.
Yes.
Particularly since it's available in so many languages. And we also didn't even get to the specific question of community boards. So again, read the guide, I think is the thing we have to take home, and make sure people understand. So unfortunately, we're out of time for this segment, but I want to thank you, Dira Gomez, again for helping me out with this segment, and of course our guest, Eric Friedman of the New York City Campaign Finance Board, for shedding light on what can be a really confusing element in New York City. Okay. Reporter Sade Bedford had the opportunity to go out onto the streets of the Bronx to see if Bronxites were aware of what is actually on the ballot. Let's take a closer look at what she found.
So how do you feel about contributions being limited to city council officials and increasing the public funding for those who can't afford them to run for city council?
Well, I do believe that those who don't have a fair chance originally now do have a fair chance, and those who can already afford to can continue to afford to. So I do feel like it's fair. It gives those personnel who wouldn't have a chance normally to now be in a position to get where they want to get to.
I think that it's unfair for them to cut the funding just because a lot of people do come from a background where they're not advantaged enough to be able to, get all the supplies that they need in order to run, but they still feel really passionate about running and changing some things.
Most likely if someone has a political agenda, they're going to push it through. The fact that I don't know the details of what you're talking about makes me suspect. Something that someone said recently, if you're not seated at the table, you're on the menu. I think it's one of those things where the people who are mostly it's going to affect are not even aware of what's going on.
Do you feel as though it would be useful for a commission to establish a new civic engagement commission that will help promote participation in the community under a budgeting program?
I feel that it will be very beneficial for there to be a budget for the community needs, and it will help individually different families and different groups into what they'll need in the community.
Well, I agree with everything she said, but it also, I guess, brings the community together if they have different activities to do, and I guess more opportunities for them to become more diverse.
Thank you, Charday. When the Bronx Journal returns, we get graphic. Where do real voters in the Bronx actually live? And how is that information gathered and made understandable? We'll have that story next, so stay with us.
Hi, I'm David Lesh, legal correspondent to the Morning Show Open. If you have a legal question that you'd like me to answer, please send me an email at davidlesh@bronxnet.org, and I will address it on our Ask Your Lawyer segment.
Welcome back to the Bronx Journal. I'm Jim Carney. Before we begin with this piece, for those listening to us through the Bronx Journal radio on the TuneIn audio app or streaming through the BronxJournal.com audio link, you can check out the graphics that we're discussing at thebronxjournal.com and follow our conversation there when we refer to maps. In 1911, the newspaper editor Tess Flanders is credited with coining the phrase, "Use a picture, it's worth 1,000 words." In the world of computer graphics and mapping, the phrase takes on real meaning. As we've been learning, there are several issues before voters on November 6th, in addition to the local state races for Assembly, Senate, and the gubernatorial race. But who's going to show up at the polls on Tuesday? With me now is Nicolette Samuels. She's a reporter with the Bronx Journal and a member of Lehman's Reporting 1 class. So, Nicolette, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. You've been reporting on data and measuring data on voter turnout. What kind of information did you get?
Well, we found that different parts of the Bronx voted at different rates.
Okay. Was it big differences in different parts of the borough, or there were pockets here and there?
Well, the map is by Assembly District.
Okay.
So Assembly District 81, which includes Riverdale, Kingsbridge, and Woodlawn, they had the highest voter. They had the highest voter rates.
I think we have a map of that, so we'll take a look at that. District 81, which is Riverdale, Kingsbridge, and Woodlawn, are part of the Northwest Bronx.
Yes.
So you had a higher vote out there. What other things did you find out?
Well, they had a 66% of enrolled voters. They voted at the polls. And Assembly District 84, which includes Mott Haven, Melrose, and Hunts Point, they had the lowest voter enrollment rates.
Okay. And why did you want to show it in a visual, like in the map? I mean, you put this map together based on that data. Why a map?
Well, I wanted to do a map because it would be easier for the audience to understand as opposed to writing out the data, which would be kind of difficult for you to see the voter turnout in each neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Do you personally get information easier by looking at a map or a graphic than you do reading lots of numbers?
Yes, I do.
I do too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think visually, and I'm terrible in math. I was terrible all through school in math. So if I could see a map, I can relate it in different ways. I think people's brains operate differently, so the maps actually make a difference in people's way to understand it. Other people, when you show them the maps, do they say, "Oh, now I understand it a little bit"?
Yeah,
or
they
say,
do,
"Oh"?
because you can see that the map is color-coded, so it's easier to understand that way, by color. The darker the color, the higher the voters are. The lighter the color, the lower the rates.
Where did you get the data or the numbers for the maps?
Well, I gathered the data for each assembly district in the Bronx from the Board of Elections website. And we contacted Angie Winner, who is a professor, a geography professor here at Lehman and Hunter College, and she helped us to turn the data into a visual.
Okay. And why the Bronx? Why did you pick the Bronx as a place that you wanted to focus on?
The Bronx has the lowest voter rates out of all the boroughs in New York City. And we wanted to show that no matter where you live, your vote counts.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, how do you think visually showing this type of information graphically helps people to get out and vote? Do you think it makes it a little bit easier to understand? Why do you think it works?
I think it works because when you see a map and you see that where you're from, people aren't voting and things aren't getting done the way how you want it to, it makes people more encouraged to go out and vote.
So it's a little bit of ownership. Oh, that's my neighborhood. Oh wow, we did terrible.
Yeah.
So, and we, from the data that you have on the map and we've seen, the North Bronx seems to vote a little higher, and the South Bronx. Does it relate at all to social mobility or income? Is it like in the poorer areas the voter numbers are lower?
Yeah, it seems so. The people who have more money seem to go out and vote more.
I think part of that might be that they have more time and more resources, and they can, as in our previous, they have the time to read through those booklets to find out what's going on. What does the map show in terms of voting power of the Bronx itself?
I think the map shows that there's power in numbers. You know, I think that the more people who go out and register and people who actually vote, their voices will be heard.
I have to be honest, when I looked at the map, I did look at my old neighborhood to see how my neighborhood did. And even though the numbers relative to the rest of the Bronx looked good, but they're still not great because so many people don't vote. So hopefully these visuals and these graphics will encourage people to look and maybe understand a little bit better.
Yeah, I hope so too.
How was the experience of gathering this data and using it to put it together? What was the experience like for you?
The experience was, it was stressful getting all the information because a lot of
journalism.
data.
It's stressful.
Yeah, but it was informational and encouraging. So maybe more people will see it and be encouraged to vote more.
Okay, and the map will be available on thebronxjournal.com for people that want to check it out. We're out of time for this segment. I do want to thank you, Nicole Samuels, Bronx Journal reporter, for working with us on that and shedding some light on how maps are created and used in the news. When the Bronx Journal continues, we'll preview an upcoming special report with two reporters who are working on an in-depth report on the changing face of housing in the Bronx. But as we go to break, here are some images for you to take a look at as the voting and the elections take place this week. We'll be right back.
Well, I got this as a paid internship. Spending my time here, I really enjoyed the people that work here. I enjoy what goes on behind the scenes.
So far, I've learned how to operate a camera, how to host. I learned how to control audio.
My first time hosting was really nerve-wracking, but I really enjoyed it because it was a new experience.
From the north to the south to the west to the east, we are expanding our services and upgrading technology at Lehman College. And now, Bronxites have an innovative media production facility in the East Bronx at Mercy College in the Hutch Metro Center. The windows on the East Bronx studio, a state-of-the-art control room, media labs for production and training, and other media-capable spaces. Training, workforce development, leading-edge technology, and programs that help you share your ideas, your voice, on your channels, locally and globally. Build media and technology skills at BronxNet and build your dreams.
Welcome back to the Bronx Journal. I'm Jim Carney. In our Look Ahead segment, we preview stories that student reporters are working on for upcoming editions of the Bronx Journal online. Anyone who lives or even travels through the Bronx in recent years, or even in the last few months, has seen an explosion of new housing springing up. What's happening with the housing in the Bronx? Here to talk about stories that they're working on regarding that are Ian Adams and Samantha Cruz from the Bronx Journal. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Ian, what's the project that you're actually working on? Define the project for us.
Well, two things we're looking into. One is in the Bronx, we're looking into buildings that are in the Bronx that are on the Public Advocate's 100 Worst Landlords site, and taking those buildings, the worst buildings that they have, and seeing what housing code violations that they have. The list's been up since January, and we want to make sure that the, we want to make sure that the landlords are taking care of the violations, that if there's anything substantial, if there's anything corrected. So,
And where are you getting this data? Where's the information?
we're getting the data from the Department of Buildings and the Housing Preservation and Development.
HPD, okay.
Right. Also, we're getting data from the state on the regulation departments as well.
From the state of New York. You've also have been using maps to try and lay this out.
Correct.
What have you found in terms of laying things out on a map?
You want to explain this, Samantha, on the maps?
Samantha, you wanna do that?
On the map we have, sorry.
That's okay.
It shows the landlords, the worst landlords from the Bronx, and from there, their worst buildings in their cluster. And we are just now starting to input the data for rent deregulation. And one of the houses that we saw had one of the highest violations so far, and has deregulated almost all of their apartments in that cluster.
So the data is going to show different varying levels of what the landlords are doing in terms, or not doing in terms of fixing. That's been a traditional problem in New York City, and especially in the Bronx, with landlords not maintaining their buildings. And all of this, it's a tool for reporting. And it helps to explain the data. What comes after this in terms of putting the story together?
Well, right now, we've already collected the data. We did the research of the data, and we're constructing everything together. The next step is to go to these buildings that are high in violations and talk to the tenants there, talk to the residents, and get their feedback on the living conditions of the apartments, the building, if there's any improvements, have they reached out to the landlord for the work orders, and just to see the progress going on in the buildings.
So you're actually going out.
Right, we're going to.
And have you started that process? Yes.
Not yet.
Do you anticipate getting some standoffishness or some hesitation on the part of some of the
We know there may
tenants?
be a few people that may be hesitant to speak about it, but we're going to pursue it, and hopefully we'll have some people that will be open enough to share their stories on their living conditions.
Good old-fashioned reporting, shoe leather reporting, as it's called, right? Going out and talking to people. Samantha, you're working on another data visualization of the project too. What are you working on?
So for the second map, it will be showing an overall view of deregulation in the Bronx. Unlike the map that we have currently, it's showing just a couple of apartment buildings in the Bronx. We want to see all of the buildings in the Bronx and see where geographically there are more, there's a cluster of deregulation. So this map is going to be either a variation of a heat map or a straightforward heat map to show like exactly where.
What do you mean by that, by a heat map?
A heat map shows you visually where a cluster or the majority of the things are. So it's where the
it's a type of map that lays out in specific areas and shows you detail clusters?
Yes, so where there are redder clusters, that's where the majority of the deregulations are. And if it's like a little lighter color or green, that's where there isn't that much going on, that much action going on there.
Do people care about this issue? Either one of you can take that question.
I think they do because it affects how people live. People who are trying to move out of their parents' house or trying to move out into the world, trying to see where they could afford to live in, which isn't that many places in New York City. And
they're getting fewer and fewer.
Yeah.
Right, and they should care because this is where they're living, and everyone should be able to live in a decent and well-provided living conditions, and that's all we want to do. We just want to provide the information for everyone, so that way they know they're living in good conditions, and if they're not living in good condition, they know where to go.
As you go to and from school and go about your business in the Bronx, what have you noticed about the housing and the different types of buildings that are going up? Does it strike you that the housing in the Bronx is changing? Either one of you.
Yeah, it's changing. You know, there's a lot of rent-stabilized apartments. They're being put on the market now. Right. So we see new people coming in, and the people who are being displaced, they're being moved to shelters, or they may stay with relatives. So we just want to investigate and find out the status of these rent-stabilized apartments and the terrible living conditions in the other apartments that the landlords are providing right now.
Right.
And I can't really speak much on it because I am not a Bronx native. I do realize in other boroughs, such as Brooklyn, that there aren't that many regulated apartments left, and it's really hard to like try to move out anywhere if you're still trying to be centralized in New York City. If your whole life, like I work in Manhattan and I come up here for school, there's not much mobility. You can't really go anywhere else.
I know that when I drive into Manhattan or other parts of the city, just coming across like the 3rd Avenue Bridge or down around Yankee Stadium, every time I turn around, there's a new luxury building going up in that area, and it's not the neighborhood I knew growing up. So we're seeing a lot of what you referred to, Samantha, about the housing becoming unavailable for people. With this new housing, luxury housing coming in, not only rent controlled, which is what you folks are working on, but the new housing that's being built, not enough of it is being set aside for people with working class incomes, and it pushes people out. So are you finding the whole project a teaching point for the two of you? Are you learning different things about housing that you didn't know about?
Yeah, learning about, there's a website that lists all the violations. You know,
Right.
This is prior information I never knew about. So within this project, I'm learning new things.
Right. Are these public information sites?
Yes,
that
these are
anyone
public
can go to?
information sites, yes.
Okay. So you're reporting in a way as providing a clearinghouse
Mm-hmm.
and a single place where people can watch and read and find out how to get information like that.
Yes.
So was the information hard to find?
Not necessarily. Once we had the addresses, we were able to go into the Housing Preservation and Development website, put in these addresses, and it will give you all their open violations.
Right.
And it also breaks it down between the 3 different classes of violations. And there's also another site where it explains to you what these classes of violations are, and it shows the time period of the time that you the landlord has to fix the
Right.
problem.
Okay. Well, all this is coming in your reporting for the Bronx Journal online, and we will have you back in our next edition to give us some more detailed findings about your research. So thank you, Ian, and thank you, Samantha, for your reporting on that and for joining me today on the Bronx Journal online. We're going to take another break, and we'll wrap things up in just a minute, so stay with us. Welcome back. The Bronx Journal, this program, is a collaborative production of Lehman College's Journalism and Media Studies Department, the Lehman Multimedia Production Center, and BronxNet Community Television. On each show, we bring you the research and reporting of students from the Journalism and Media Studies Department, as well as the work of the music, art, and other programs right here at the college. Lehman is the 4-year liberal arts college of City University of New York. The program is presented through the combined efforts of Lehman and BronxNet Community TV. That's the award-winning community television and media organization that comes to you via their cable TV channels and streamed on demand through bronxnet.org and through bronxjournal.com. The reporting and work on this program is created and presented by the students of Lehman College. On each program of the Bronx Journal, we'll extend the program to include you. Let us know what you think of our question of the week. Earlier, we asked that question. This week, we took to the streets to find out what Bronxites thought about the Puerto Rican problem. A year later, what's happening to the island and what should happen to the island, and how are Puerto Ricans dealing with it. Okay? Let us know what you think by tweeting at the Bronx Journal. That's the hashtag. You can reach us on Instagram at Bronx Journal, and also at our Facebook page, which is probably the easiest way. While you're there, let us know what you think about us and the stories you think we should be covering on upcoming editions of the Bronx Journal TV program, as well as our online newspaper and radio programs. So till next time, we will see you online, on the internet, on internet radio, and on cable. I'm Jim Carney, and we are the Bronx Journal.